I never expected that building a small workshop in my garage would trigger a neighborhood war, but that's exactly what happened when Patricia Carmichael decided my perfectly legal hobby space was her new crusade. My name is Zachary Lawson, and I'd been living in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Charlotte, North Carolina for about 3 years when this whole mess started. I worked as a software engineer from home, which meant I spent most of my days staring at screens. To balance that out, I had taken up woodworking as a hobby. Nothing fancy, just basic furniture projects and the occasional cutting board or shelf for friends. My 2-car garage had plenty of space, so I converted half of it into a modest workshop with a table saw, a few hand tools, and some storage for lumber. Everything was going fine until Patricia moved into the house 2 doors down from mine. She was in her mid-50s, had that severe haircut that seemed to be issued along with HOA board positions, and within 2 weeks of moving in, she had already sent complaint letters to half the neighborhood. Someone's mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Another person's lawn had dandelions. A third homeowner had committed the cardinal sin of parking their work van in their own driveway overnight. I should have known I would be next on her list. It was a Tuesday morning in late March when I got the first knock. I'd been working on a bookshelf for my home office, the sound of my table saw cutting through pine boards filling the garage. I had the garage door halfway open for ventilation, wearing my safety glasses and ear protection, completely absorbed in getting a clean cut. When I turned off the saw and removed my ear protection, I noticed Patricia standing at the end of my driveway with her phone out, taking pictures. "Can I help you?" I called out, walking toward her while brushing sawdust off my shirt. She lowered her phone and fixed me with a look that could curdle milk. "I am documenting safety violations. That workshop of yours is a clear fire hazard, and I will be reporting it to the proper authorities." I blinked, confused. Fire hazard? I have 2 fire extinguishers in there. I clean up the sawdust regularly, and all my electrical is up to code. I had an electrician install dedicated circuits when I set everything up. "That's what you say," Patricia replied, her voice dripping with suspicion. "But I know what I see. Piles of flammable wood, power tools everywhere, sparks flying. It is only a matter of time before you burn down the entire neighborhood." "Sparks?" I repeated. "It is a table saw, not a welding torch. There are no sparks." She waved her hand dismissively. "I will let the fire marshal decide that, and the HOA will be hearing about this as well. There are rules about operating businesses from residential properties." "It is not a business," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It is a hobby. I do not sell anything. I just build stuff for myself, and occasionally as gifts." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "We will see about that." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, phone still in hand. I stood there for a moment, frustrated and bewildered. I had checked all the HOA rules before setting up my workshop. There was nothing prohibiting hobby workshops in garages. People had home gyms, art studios, all sorts of things. As long as you were not running a commercial operation or causing disturbances, it was perfectly fine. Shaking my head, I went back to my bookshelf project, figuring Patricia was just being Patricia, and nothing would come of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, a white SUV with the Charlotte Fire Department logo pulled up in front of my house. I watched through my front window as a man in a uniform got out, clipboard in hand, and walked up to my door. My stomach sank. I opened the door before he could knock. "Hi, can I help you?" The man was in his 40s with graying hair and a professional demeanor. "Good afternoon. I'm Fire Marshal Davidson. I received a complaint about a potential fire hazard on this property. Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, I am Zachary Lawson. Please come in." I stepped aside to let him enter, my mind racing. "I'm guessing this is about my workshop?" "That's correct. Someone filed a complaint alleging unsafe storage of flammable materials and improper electrical installations." He glanced at his clipboard. "Do you mind if I take a look?" "Not at all. The workshop is in my garage." I led him through the house and into the garage where my partially finished bookshelf sat on the workbench. The space was tidy, with lumber stacked neatly against one wall, tools organized on pegboards, and both fire extinguishers clearly visible and properly mounted. Marshal Davidson walked slowly around the space, examining everything. He checked the electrical outlets, looked at my dust collection system, inspected the fire extinguishers, and even opened my storage cabinets to see how I kept my finishing supplies. The whole inspection took about 20 minutes, during which I stood nervously by the door, trying not to hover. Finally, he made some notes on his clipboard and turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, I have to say, this is one of the better home workshops I've seen. Your electrical is properly installed and grounded, you have adequate fire suppression equipment, your flammable materials are stored correctly in those metal cabinets, and you are clearly maintaining the space well. There are no violations here." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. I tried to do everything by the book when I set this up." He nodded approvingly. "It shows. Can I ask who made the complaint?" "A neighbor, Patricia Carmichael. She moved in a few weeks ago and has been vocal about various things in the neighborhood." Marshal Davidson's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable crossing his face. "Patricia Carmichael, you said?" "Yes, she lives 2 doors down, the gray house with the black shutters." He wrote something on his clipboard, then looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Mr. Lawson, when I receive a complaint like this, I'm required to do a thorough check. Sometimes, while I'm in a neighborhood, I notice other things." He paused. "I could not help but notice that gray house has what looks like a separate entrance on the side, and there were 2 different sets of cars parked there when I drove by. Would you happen to know if that property is being rented out?" I thought about it. I had noticed people coming and going from Patricia's house, but I had assumed they were guests or maybe adult children. "I'm not sure, honestly. Why?" "Well, if a property has been converted to include a rental unit, there are specific fire safety codes that apply. Separate means of egress, smoke detectors in specific locations, fire-rated walls between units, that sort of thing. I might need to verify that everything is up to code there as well." Something in his tone made me think he already suspected something was not right. "Is that common?" "You would be surprised how many people convert their homes for rental income without pulling the proper permits or meeting safety requirements. It is actually a serious issue." He handed me a card. "Anyway, you are all clear here. If you have any questions about fire safety in the future, feel free to give me a call." "Thank you. I appreciate it." After Marshal Davidson left, I stood in my garage for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. Patricia had tried to get me in trouble, and it had backfired spectacularly. If the fire marshal found code violations at her place, she would be the one dealing with fines and required corrections, not me. I probably should have felt some satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. I did not want to be in a feud with a neighbor. I just wanted to work on my projects in peace. The weekend passed quietly, and I did not see Patricia at all. I finished the bookshelf and started planning my next project, a coffee table for my living room. Monday morning, I was in my home office for a video call when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor directly next door, Marcus Green. Marcus was a retired teacher in his 60s, and he had lived in Meadowbrook Heights since the subdivision was built 15 years ago. The text read, "You might want to check the HOA forum. Patricia is on a warpath about your workshop." I groaned and opened my laptop to the neighborhood HOA website. Sure enough, there was a new post from Patricia in the community forum posted that morning. "Urgent safety concern. A resident on Maple Court is operating an illegal workshop that poses a severe fire risk to our entire community. Despite my attempts to address this directly, the homeowner refuses to cease this dangerous activity. I am calling for an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss immediate action, including fines and potential legal remedies. Our safety must come first." The post already had a dozen responses, most of them confused or questioning. A few people defended my right to have a hobby workshop. One person, thankfully, pointed out that there was nothing in the HOA covenants prohibiting workshops. But Patricia had responded to every comment with increasingly hysterical claims about fire danger and property values. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. I typed out a calm response explaining that the fire marshal had inspected my workshop and found 0 violations, and that I was in full compliance with all local codes and HOA rules. I kept it factual and unemotional, hoping to diffuse the situation. Patricia's response came within 5 minutes. "One inspection means nothing. You are still endangering us all, and I will not rest until this is resolved properly. The HOA board will take action." I closed my laptop, frustrated. This was getting ridiculous. That evening, I got a call from Robert Hernandez, the HOA board president. Robert was a reasonable guy, a civil engineer who actually understood how rules and codes worked. "Zachary, hey, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," Robert said. "No, you are fine. I assume this is about Patricia's forum post?" "Yeah." He sighed heavily. "Look, I want you to know that the board is not taking her complaint seriously. We have reviewed the covenants, and there is nothing that prohibits what you are doing. As long as you are not running a commercial operation or creating disturbances, you are fine. I appreciate that. The whole thing is just so unnecessary. I know, and I am sorry you are dealing with it. Patricia has been challenging since she joined the community. Between you and me, we have received more complaints from her in 1 month than we typically get in a year." He paused. "She is actually demanding to be appointed to the HOA board. She thinks we need more rigorous enforcement of standards." I could not help but laugh bitterly. "Of course she does. We are going to send out an official statement to the community clarifying the rules around home workshops and other similar uses. Hopefully that will put this to rest. But if she keeps harassing you, document everything. If it crosses a line into actual harassment, you might need to consider legal options." "Thanks, Robert. I really do appreciate the support." "No problem. Just keep doing what you are doing and try not to let her get to you." Easier said than done, I thought, after we hung up. But I was determined not to let Patricia ruin something I enjoyed. I went back to my workshop and started cutting pieces for the coffee table. The next few weeks were tense but relatively quiet. The HOA sent out their statement, which Patricia immediately complained about on the forum, calling the board negligent and compromised. Most people ignored her rants, and life went on. I saw Patricia occasionally when I checked my mail or took out the trash, but we did not speak. She would glare at me, I would nod politely, and we would go our separate ways. Then, about 3 weeks after the fire marshal's visit, I came home from a grocery run to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the Charlotte Fire Department, but this time it was not about me. The notice, which was public record, indicated that the property at Patricia's address had been inspected for compliance with residential rental property codes. The inspection had revealed multiple serious violations, including an unpermitted conversion of the basement into a rental unit, inadequate fire separation between the rental unit and the main residence, missing required smoke detectors, blocked egress windows, and improper electrical modifications. The property had been issued a cease and desist order, meaning Patricia had to immediately stop renting out the unit until all violations were corrected and proper permits obtained. I stood on my front porch, reading the notice with a growing sense of disbelief. Patricia had been running an illegal rental, and now, because she had called the fire marshal on me, he had discovered her violations and shut her down. The irony was almost too perfect. I was not the only one who received a copy of the notice. Marshal Davidson had posted copies to all the immediate neighbors, as was required for code enforcement actions. Within an hour, the neighborhood group chat was blowing up, and the HOA forum had multiple threads discussing the situation. Marcus texted me, well, looks like Patricia had a bigger fire hazard than you did." I did not respond publicly to any of the forum posts. I did not gloat or make snide comments. Part of me wanted to, but I knew it would just make things worse. Instead, I saved a copy of the notice for my records and went about my day. Patricia, however, did not stay quiet. That evening, she posted a long, rambling message on the HOA forum, claiming that the fire marshal had targeted her in retaliation for her whistleblowing about my workshop. She insisted that her rental unit was perfectly safe, and that this was all part of a conspiracy to silence her legitimate safety concerns. She demanded that the HOA take action against both the fire marshal and me. The responses were not sympathetic. Several people pointed out that fire codes existed for good reasons and that she needed to take responsibility for her violations. Someone else noted that if she was so concerned about fire safety, she should have made sure her own property was compliant before filing complaints about others. Robert, posting in his official capacity as board president, reminded everyone to keep discussions civil, but made it clear that the HOA had no authority over city code enforcement actions. Patricia's meltdown continued over the next several days. She sent emails to the entire board. She filed complaints with the city claiming the fire marshal had exceeded his authority, and she even posted flyers around the neighborhood warning people about corrupt officials and vigilante neighbors. The flyers included my address, which crossed a line from annoying to potentially problematic. I called Robert after finding one of the flyers taped to the community mailbox. She is putting my address on flyers now. This feels like harassment. I saw them. I have already taken photos and I am documenting this. The board is meeting tomorrow night and we are going to discuss options. This has gone beyond a simple dispute. She is creating a hostile environment for you and interfering with community harmony. What can the HOA actually do? We can issue a formal warning for harassment, and if she continues, we can fine her for violating the civility standards in our governing documents. If it keeps escalating beyond that, the HOA can pursue legal action, though we prefer not to go that route. We are also going to recommend that you document everything and consider getting a consultation with an attorney just to understand your options if you need to pursue a restraining order. That word, restraining order, made everything feel more real and more serious. This had started as a petty complaint about sawdust and was now spiraling into legitimate legal territory. The next day, I compiled a folder with every email, text message, forum post, and photo related to Patricia's behavior. I took pictures of all the flyers I could find. I wrote a detailed timeline of events. Then I made an appointment with a local attorney who specialized in neighbor disputes and harassment cases. The attorney, Jennifer Cho, reviewed my documentation during our consultation and nodded approvingly. "You have done a good job keeping records. This is clearly a pattern of harassment. The good news is that you have not retaliated or engaged in any similar behavior, which strengthens your position. The flyers with your address are particularly concerning, as they could be seen as inciting others to target you. What do you think I should do? For now, continue documenting everything. Do not engage with her directly. Let the HOA handle their side of things. If her behavior escalates to direct threats, property damage, or if you feel unsafe, we can pursue a restraining order." I would say we are not quite there yet, but we are getting close. She leaned back in her chair. The situation with the fire marshal shutting down her rental, that is actually significant. She is probably facing substantial financial pressure right now. Correcting those code violations is expensive, and she has lost rental income. People under that kind of stress can become unpredictable. "That is reassuring," I said dryly. Jennifer smiled slightly. "I know it is not ideal, but being aware of the dynamics helps. She sees you as the cause of her problems, even though she brought this on herself. That is not rational, but it is how she is processing it. Just be cautious and aware of your surroundings." I left the attorney's office feeling both more prepared and more anxious. This was not how I had envisioned my life in Meadowbrook Heights going. The HOA board meeting took place on a Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. I did not attend because Robert said my presence might inflame the situation, but he called me afterward with an update. "Patricia showed up and used her entire allotted speaking time to rant about you, the fire marshal, and the board. She accused us of corruption and demanded we take action against you for filing false reports about her property. She claimed you somehow manipulated the fire marshal into targeting her." "That is insane. I did not file any report. Marshal Davidson noticed issues while he was in the neighborhood investigating her complaint about me." "I know, and we explained that to her multiple times. She was not interested in hearing it. The board voted unanimously to issue a formal written warning for harassment, and we made it clear that any further behavior targeting you or spreading misinformation about other residents will result in fines and potential legal action from the HOA." "How did she react?" "She stormed out, said we were all part of the conspiracy, and threatened to sue the HOA. Honestly, Zachary, I have been on this board for 7 years, and I have never seen anything like this." After the board meeting, things got quiet for about a week. I did not see Patricia, I did not get any more flyers, and the forum posts stopped. I allowed myself to hope that maybe the formal warning had worked and she was backing off. Then my workshop was vandalized. I discovered it on a Saturday morning. I'd gone into the garage to start work on the coffee table, and immediately something felt wrong. The door leading from the house to the garage was closed, as it should be, but when I opened it, I saw chaos. My lumber rack had been knocked over, boards scattered across the floor. My toolbox had been opened and tools thrown around. Someone had spray-painted "fire hazard" in red across my workbench. Worse, my table saw had been damaged. Someone had tried to pry off the blade guard and had bent several parts in the process. I stood frozen for a moment, then immediately called the police without touching anything. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I explained the situation while they photographed the damage and dusted for fingerprints on the workbench and tools. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Martinez, asked me about any ongoing disputes with neighbors. "I've been having issues with Patricia Carmichael, 2 doors down. She's been harassing me for weeks about this workshop." I pulled out my phone and showed her the documentation folder I had been keeping. Officer Martinez reviewed it carefully, her expression growing more serious as she scrolled through the timeline. "This is good documentation. The fact that she spray-painted the same words she's been using in her complaints is significant. Did you have your garage locked?" The main garage door was down, and the door from the house was locked. Someone must have come in through the side door. It has a deadbolt, but it is old. I guess it could have been forced or picked. The officers examined the side door and found scratches around the lock consistent with forced entry. They took more photos and collected paint samples from the spray paint. "We are going to talk to Ms. Carmichael, along with any other neighbors who might have seen something," Officer Martinez said. "You should also file a report with your homeowner's insurance about the damage. Do you have any security cameras?" I shook my head, feeling stupid. "No, I never thought I would need them. You might want to consider getting some installed. Video evidence makes these cases much easier to prosecute." After the police left, I called my insurance company and filed a claim, then spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess and assessing the damage. The lumber was fine, just disorganized. Most of the tools were okay, though a few had been damaged when they were thrown. The table saw was the biggest loss. The bent parts would need to be replaced, and it was an older model, so finding parts might be difficult. All told, I estimated about $1,500 in damages. Marcus came over when he saw the police cars. When I showed him the garage, he swore under his breath. "This is unacceptable. Patricia has completely lost it. The police are going to question her, but I do not know if they will be able to prove anything without cameras or witnesses. I might be able to help with that." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I installed a doorbell camera last year after we had some package thieves in the neighborhood. It faces the street, but depending on the angle, it might have caught someone walking toward your house. What time do you think this happened?" "I was last in the garage around 9 yesterday evening. I discovered it this morning around 8, so sometime during those 11 hours, probably in the middle of the night when no one would see. Let me check the footage when I get home. I will call you if I find anything." True to his word, Marcus called me 2 hours later. "Zachary, you need to come see this. I've got her on camera." I practically ran to Marcus's house. He had his laptop open on his kitchen table, with the doorbell camera footage queued up. "This is from 2:30 this morning," he said, hitting play. The video was grainy and dark, but the streetlights provided enough illumination to make out a figure walking down the sidewalk toward my house. The person was wearing dark clothing and a hood, but as they passed under a streetlight directly in front of Marcus's house, the camera caught a clear view of her face for just a moment. It was Patricia. The video showed her walking purposefully toward my driveway, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. A few minutes later, the camera caught her walking back in the other direction, moving more quickly. "I am sending this to you and to the police right now," Marcus said, already typing. "This is clear evidence of her being at your property at the time the vandalism occurred. Marcus, I cannot thank you enough. Are you kidding? That woman has made this neighborhood miserable. I am happy to help nail her for this." I called Officer Martinez immediately and told her about the video. She asked Marcus to email it directly to her, and she said she would follow up that afternoon. The police returned to Patricia's house around 4 in the evening. I did not watch from my window, not wanting to seem like I was gloating, but Marcus texted me updates. Patricia had apparently denied everything at first, claiming she had been home all night. But when the police showed her Marcus's video footage, she had changed tactics and started claiming she had just been out for a walk and had not gone into my garage. The problem for Patricia was that they had her on video at 2:30 in the morning, walking specifically toward my house, and they had physical evidence of forced entry and vandalism that occurred during that time frame. She was arrested and charged with criminal trespassing, vandalism, and property damage. I felt a complicated mix of emotions watching the police car drive away with Patricia in the back seat. Part of me felt vindicated after weeks of harassment, part of me felt bad that things had escalated this far, and part of me was just exhausted from the entire ordeal. Robert called that evening. "I heard about the arrest. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, just tired. I never wanted any of this." "I know. For what it is worth, the board is fully supportive of you. We are also going to be discussing additional measures against Patricia at our next meeting. Vandalism and criminal activity by a homeowner creates liability issues for the HOA. Over the next few weeks, the legal process moved forward. Patricia posted bail but was required to stay away from my property as a condition of her release. The HOA followed through with substantial fines for her violations of community standards and initiated proceedings to place a lien on her property for unpaid fines and the costs of the fire code violations. Patricia's financial situation was apparently becoming dire. Not only did she have legal fees for the criminal case, but she also had to pay for all the repairs to bring her rental unit up to code, and she had lost the rental income during that time. The HOA fines added up quickly, and she had not been able to find tenants willing to rent while she was dealing with code enforcement. In early May, about 6 weeks after her arrest, Patricia's attorney reached out to my attorney, Jennifer Cho, with a settlement proposal. Patricia wanted to avoid going to trial on the criminal charges and was willing to plead guilty in exchange for a recommendation of probation rather than jail time. As part of the settlement, she would pay full restitution for the damages to my workshop, cover my attorney fees, and agree to a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me or coming near my property for 3 years. Jennifer advised me that it was a reasonable offer. The criminal case is strong, but trials are unpredictable. This way you get full compensation for your damages, and you have legal protection going forward. The guilty plea also means she has a criminal record, which has its own consequences for her. I agreed to the settlement. I was not interested in revenge. I just wanted this to be over and to get back to my normal life. The plea hearing took place in late May at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. I attended, sitting in the gallery while Patricia stood before the judge and formally entered her guilty plea. The judge accepted the plea agreement and sentenced her to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay restitution. The restraining order was entered as part of the court record. Patricia looked small and defeated standing at the defendant's table, nothing like the aggressive, self-righteous woman who had started all of this by taking photos of my workshop. I did not feel triumphant watching her. I just felt relieved that it was over. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright May sunshine. Jennifer walked with me to the parking lot, carrying her briefcase. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Die Frau." "Now you go home and get back to your life. Patricia will be on probation for 2 years, which means she has to comply with all the terms of her sentence or risk going to jail. The restraining order is in place, so if she violates it, call the police immediately. She will have to deal with the HOA and the city code enforcement separately, but that is her problem, not yours." "What about her rental property?" "That is still an open issue. Last I heard, she was trying to sell the house because she can't afford the repairs and the fines. But that is not your concern. You did nothing wrong here. She created all of these problems for herself." I drove home through Charlotte, taking the familiar route through the city streets to my subdivision in the suburbs. Meadowbrook Heights looked peaceful in the late afternoon light, with kids playing in yards and people walking dogs. It looked like the quiet, normal neighborhood I had thought I was moving into 3 years ago. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed that someone had left a gift basket on my front porch. I picked it up and found a card from several of my neighbors, thanking me for handling the situation with Patricia so professionally and wishing me well. Inside were some nice cookies, coffee, and a gift card to the local hardware store. I brought the basket inside, genuinely touched by the gesture. For all the stress and drama of the past couple of months, it was good to be reminded that most people were decent and supportive. I walked through to my garage to survey my restored workshop. The insurance payout had covered the damaged tools, and I had even upgraded a few things in the process. The spray paint had been impossible to remove from the workbench, so I had sanded it down and refinished the surface. In a weird way, it looked better now than it had before. I picked up where I had left off on the coffee table project, measuring and cutting pieces, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of the work. The smell of sawdust, the sound of the saw, the satisfaction of seeing pieces come together. It was all exactly what I needed. Life slowly returned to normal over the following weeks. I finished the coffee table and moved on to a new project, a set of floating shelves for my bedroom. I video called with my family and told them the whole crazy story, leaving them both shocked and amused. My mom insisted that I install security cameras, which I finally did, mounting them at all the entrances to my property. The neighborhood gossip eventually moved on to other topics. Patricia's house went up for sale in mid-June, and she moved out before it sold. I heard through Marcus that she had relocated to somewhere in South Carolina to live with family while she completed her probation. The house sold in August to a young couple with a toddler, and they seemed nice and normal when I met them at the neighborhood barbecue over Labor Day weekend. Robert stepped down as HOA president that fall, having served his term and wanting to pass the torch to someone else. The new president, a woman named Diana Foster, who worked as a project manager, was equally reasonable and committed to keeping the HOA focused on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement. Under her leadership, the board actually revised some of the more outdated rules and implemented a better process for handling disputes before they escalated. I continued my woodworking hobby, eventually building enough furniture that my house was full, and I started giving pieces away to friends and family. I even taught a few informal workshops for other neighbors who were interested in learning basic woodworking skills. Marcus came to several of them and built a nice planter box for his wife's garden. Looking back on everything that happened, I sometimes still felt amazed at how wildly things had escalated from such a simple beginning. Patricia had seen my workshop as a problem that needed to be fixed, and in her determination to force me to shut it down, she had inadvertently exposed her own serious code violations and eventually destroyed her own financial stability and reputation. The lesson I took away was that sometimes people create their own worst problems. If Patricia had just minded her own business or approached me as a reasonable neighbor to discuss any genuine concerns, none of this would have happened. Instead, her need to control and dominate the situation had led her down a path of escalating aggression until she crossed legal lines and faced real consequences. I also learned the importance of documentation and knowing your rights. If I had not kept careful records of Patricia's harassment, if I had not had the support of reasonable people like Robert and Marcus, if I had not consulted with an attorney when things started getting serious, the outcome could have been very different. Standing up for yourself was important, but doing it the right way, through proper channels and with good evidence, made all the difference. My workshop remained exactly where it was, in my garage, operating safely and legally. I had added a few more safety features after everything happened, not because I needed to, but because it gave me peace of mind. A better dust collection system, additional lighting, a few more fire extinguishers strategically placed. I took pride in maintaining a clean, organized, safe workspace. On weekend mornings, I would open the garage door halfway for ventilation, put on my safety gear, and lose myself in whatever project I was working on. Sometimes neighbors would stop by to see what I was building, and I was always happy to show them. The community had seen firsthand that my workshop was not a fire hazard or a danger to anyone. It was just a space where I pursued a hobby I loved. The irony that Patricia's illegal rental had been the actual fire hazard all along was not lost on anyone. The new owners of her former house had done a walkthrough with the fire marshal after purchasing the property, and they had been shocked at the extent of the violations. Improper wiring that could have sparked a fire, blocked exits that could have trapped tenants in an emergency, missing smoke detectors that would have failed to alert anyone to danger. Patricia had been so focused on imaginary hazards at my place that she had ignored real, serious dangers in her own home. Sometimes I wondered if she ever recognized the irony or took any responsibility for what had happened. Probably not. People like Patricia rarely did. They were so convinced of their own righteousness that they could not see how their actions affected others or acknowledge when they were wrong. But that was not my problem anymore. Patricia was gone, living her life somewhere else, hopefully learning from her mistakes, but probably not. I was here, in my home, in my community, doing what I loved without interference or harassment. On a cool Saturday morning in October, almost 7 months after the whole ordeal had ended, I was in my workshop building a jewelry box as a birthday gift for my sister. It was a detailed project with multiple small drawers and a mirror inset, requiring precision and patience. I was so focused on getting the dovetail joints perfect that I did not notice someone approaching until I heard a knock on the doorframe. I turned off my saw and looked up to see the new neighbors who had bought Patricia's old house. The husband, whose name was Kevin, stood there with a smile. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "I was walking by and saw you working. That is a beautiful piece." "Thanks, it is coming along. What can I do for you?" "I actually wanted to ask if you would be willing to build something for us. We are looking for a custom entertainment center for our living room, and after seeing your work, I thought you might be interested. We would pay, of course." I hesitated. This was exactly what Patricia had falsely accused me of doing, running a business from my home. But there was nothing in the HOA rules prohibiting an occasional commission piece, as long as I was not operating a full commercial workshop with regular customers and business income. "I appreciate you thinking of me," I said carefully. "I do this as a hobby, but I have done a few commissioned pieces for friends. Let me take a look at your space and see if it is something I can take on. I'm pretty busy with my day job, so I could not promise a fast turnaround." "That would be great. We are not in a rush. Come by whenever you have time." We exchanged numbers, and Kevin headed back to his house. I stood in my garage holding my tape measure and felt a sense of satisfaction. This was what a normal neighborhood was supposed to be like. Neighbors helping each other, trading skills and services, building community in the literal and figurative sense. I finished the jewelry box for my sister and delivered it for her birthday in November. She loved it, immediately filling it with her collection of earrings and necklaces. She posted pictures on social media, and I got several messages from friends asking if I would build things for them too. I politely declined most of them, explaining that I only had time for occasional projects, and I wanted to keep it as a hobby, not turn it into a business. But I did agree to build that entertainment center for Kevin and his wife. It was a fun challenge, designing something that fit their space and style while incorporating the features they wanted. I worked on it over several weeks, cutting and assembling pieces in my garage workshop, the same workshop that Patricia had tried so hard to shut down. When I delivered and installed the finished entertainment center in early December, Kevin and his wife were thrilled. They insisted on paying me well above what I had quoted, and Kevin said it was the best custom furniture he had ever seen. Their toddler daughter watched the installation with big eyes, fascinated by the tools and the process. "When she is older, maybe she can take one of your woodworking classes," Kevin joked. "I would be happy to teach her," I said, and I meant it. Driving home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. I had gone from being harassed and accused of being a danger to the neighborhood to being a valued member of the community, someone people trusted and respected. Patricia's attempt to destroy my reputation and force me out had ultimately failed completely, while her own reputation in life had been damaged, possibly permanently. The holidays came and went, and I spent time with family and friends, grateful for the peace and normalcy. My workshop stayed busy with personal projects, and I even started a new hobby of making wooden toys to donate to a local children's charity. The simple joy of creating something with my own hands never got old. In January, almost a full year after Patricia had first knocked on my door with her accusations, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Patricia's attorney informing me that she had completed the restitution payments as ordered by the court. Enclosed was a cashier's check for the final installment. There was no personal note, no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing beyond the legal requirement. I had not expected one. I deposited the check and filed the letter with all the other documentation from the case, then closed the folder and put it away in a filing cabinet. That chapter was over. Spring arrived, bringing warm weather and blooming flowers. The neighborhood came alive with activity. Kids riding bikes, people working in their gardens, weekend barbecues, and block parties. I attended the annual HOA meeting in March, where Diana Foster gave a presentation on the state of the community and the board's plans for the year. One of the items mentioned was a new community workshop program, where residents with skills could offer classes to other neighbors. Woodworking, gardening, home repair, cooking, whatever people wanted to teach and learn. I volunteered to teach a basic woodworking class, and within a week I had a dozen people signed up. We held the first session in my garage on a Saturday morning, and I walked everyone through the basics of safety, tool usage, and simple joinery techniques. The group included people of all ages and backgrounds, all eager to learn a new skill. Teaching others brought a new dimension to my hobby. Seeing someone successfully complete their first project, watching their face light up with pride and accomplishment, reminded me why I had fallen in love with woodworking in the first place. It was not just about the finished product. It was about the process, the problem-solving, the satisfaction of creating something with your own hands. As spring turned to summer, life in Meadowbrook Heights continued its peaceful rhythm. I worked my software engineering job during the week, built furniture and taught classes on weekends, and enjoyed the company of good neighbors and friends. The drama with Patricia felt like a distant memory, something that had happened to someone else. But I never forgot the lessons I had learned. I kept my documentation habits, saved important emails and records, and stayed aware of my rights and responsibilities as a homeowner and community member. I maintained my workshop to the highest safety standards, not because anyone was watching or complaining, but because it was the right thing to do. I treated my neighbors with respect and kindness, and I received the same in return. One warm evening in late August, I was sitting on my back deck with a cold drink, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus came over and joined me, settling into one of the deck chairs with a satisfied sigh. "Beautiful evening," he said. "Sure is." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just enjoying the weather and the quiet. Then Marcus spoke again. "You know, I've been thinking about everything that happened with Patricia last year. The whole crazy mess." "Yeah? I think the neighborhood is better off without her. I know that sounds harsh, but it is true. She brought negativity and conflict everywhere she went. Now we have Kevin and his family, and they are wonderful people. Sometimes things work out the way they are supposed to." I nodded, considering his words. I just wish it could have been resolved without all the drama and legal action. I never wanted anyone to get arrested or lose their home. "I know you didn't, but some people create their own problems, and then they have to face the consequences. You handled everything with class and integrity. You should be proud of that." "Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate everything you did to help. That video footage made all the difference." He waved his hand dismissively. "I was happy to help. That is what neighbors are supposed to do. Look out for each other." We finished our drinks as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow I would be back in my workshop, working on a new project, teaching another class, living my life the way I wanted to live it. Patricia had tried to take that away from me and had failed. In the end, all she had accomplished was proving that sometimes karma worked exactly the way it should. The workshop in my garage continued to hum with activity, creating furniture, building community, and proving that with proper planning, reasonable behavior, and respect for rules and neighbors, there was no conflict between pursuing your passions and being a good member of your community. That was the real lesson, not the drama or the legal consequences, but the simple truth that most people were reasonable, and most problems could be avoided with basic courtesy and common sense. And if you encountered someone who lacked those qualities, someone like Patricia who was determined to create conflict and cause problems, the best defense was to know your rights, document everything, follow proper procedures, and let the truth speak for itself. Eventually, reality caught up with people who operated in bad faith, and justice, sometimes poetic justice, found a way to prevail. My story was not unique. Neighborhood disputes happened everywhere. But the outcome was instructive. Stand up for yourself, but do it the right way. Treat others with respect, even when they do not deserve it. Follow the rules and expect others to do the same. Document everything, trust the process, and never let someone else's negativity and aggression destroy your peace or force you to abandon something you love. The workshop was still there, safely operating, legally compliant, and more active than ever. That was my victory. Not that Patricia had been arrested or fined or forced to move, but that I had been able to continue doing what I loved despite her best efforts to stop me. In the end, that was all that mattered, living my life on my terms, pursuing my passions, and contributing positively to my community. And if the fire marshal happened to discover code violations during his investigation, well, that was just another example of how the truth had a way of coming out, and people who lived in glass houses should not throw stones, or in Patricia's case, people with illegal rental units should not file false complaints about their neighbors' workshops. The irony would never stop being remarkable, but that was how it had unfolded, and I was at peace with all of it. As I locked up my workshop that night and headed into the house, I paused to look around at the quiet street, the neat houses, the peaceful suburban neighborhood I called home. This was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do. And no one, not Patricia or anyone else, had been able to take that away from me. That was worth more than any piece of furniture I could ever build.